What's happening, everyone? Art at Patience Metal Fab, and I'm bringing you another episode on our Volkswagen Beetle build. Now, if you watched the last video, you know towards the end of it, we changed the game plan for this car completely, and since then, we've gotten it over on our frame table. It's been fixtured, and the body's actually come off of the frame. Now, I'm gonna flash up the footage of how it got to this point, and then we're quickly gonna get into a lot of progress on this build. This is gonna be a great video. Stay tuned and enjoy. The thing that's coming off the frame table is actually really cool as well. As you can see, it started life as a Sonoma or an S10, and we built a fully custom frame for this. So I want to do a breakdown video once we get it on the ground, just to show you guys exactly the amount of work that went into building this frame. And now we cue the ridiculous shuffle scene. Well, this is something you don't see every day. It almost looks like we're setting this Beetle up for a monster truck build. It was awesome to see the body come off of the frame, and eventually we're gonna be getting our gantry out. That way we could attach it to the top and move it in and out of the frame table. For now, we need the ability to lift and lower the body onto the frame. That way these guys can get the right measurements. You saw Ben just taking a few measurements on the frame itself. And eventually we're gonna be cutting the tub out somewhere. I'm not sure where. I see some rudimentary lines made here, so it could be that the front and the rear suspension, the major components get cut out, and then the tube frame sort of gets built around it. As you guys have been watching, Max has been putting in a ton of work on the Volkswagen Beetle over the last couple of days, and we're getting to a point in the build where it might look a little bit confusing to you guys. I know it's starting to get a little confusing to me because we're fixturing things, we're cutting things, and now parts of the chassis are higher and lower than when it came in. So I figured I'd grab Gary and he can give us a bit of a breakdown, starting with why it originally came in here, and did we ever think that we were just gonna start chopping it back apart after that?
I don't know that you ever think you're going to start cutting it back apart. The big thing with this is the fact that the suspension was designed to operate at a set ride height. Due to the customer changes, due to the way he wants this to appear now, and needing to get the body lower in relation to the suspension, that's where it's going to require us to move the stuff. You remember, we actually installed this Cool Ride Customs cradle that sat over the original pan. You can see now the difference in height between where that suspension needs to sit to actually get this car where it needs to be and where it sat originally. So we're not losing the work that was done, but we're certainly taking a little bit of a step back by having to cut the actual spine of this floor pan, removing the body in relation to the suspension. What we don't want to lose is the actual geometry of the suspension, where it's supposed to sit at ride height and where it sits in relation between the front and the rear. This lets us do exactly that. We're able to fixture our front suspension as a whole unit, and as you'll see in the back, fixture our rear suspension pickup points individually, but all in relation to each other. They're in the same place. That way, as we move the body around, these things don't move. The way that we can actually determine where these need to sit, you hear us refer to ride height geometry a lot, is your lower control arm on an independent front suspension should sit slightly swept down to the outside. That way, as the car travels, the suspension travels through its range, you're not up here and you're not down here. This control arm's able to travel through the center of its arc. So the length of the coilover at its 60% ride height is mimicked with this brace piece we made. It holds this in the correct location, allows us to fixture this where we need to, and then the body can be set to the height that we're looking for cosmetically.
What that really means is we've set the suspension dynamics, and then the fixture bars hold it in a specific spot. That way, when we do the major cut on the front and rear and drop the body, this all stays where we want it to stay. And you can see that really clearly in the back because of this cut right here. This is where it used to be, and this is where it is now.
The challenge with this is there's a lot invested in making sure that the 450 horse air-cooled motor that fits in this thing fits underneath the trunk lid, bonnet, hood, whatever you want to call it. So this yoke being what mounts the motor, the transmission, the shift linkage comes through, this all needs to drop in relation to the body. So then that means that the suspension mounting points, which is the main beam, and this inner ear that we welded on for the Cool Ride Customs kit, all needs to stay, again, in its same plane in relation to the front. So this gets a lot more cut up. The front, one big cut, that's all one unit, fairly easy. Back here, a lot more involved. What will probably honestly happen with this is most of this stuff will ultimately wind up going away, and these mounting points will wind up getting tied into the chassis, plates, pieces made. We might retain some of this. We'll see as we kind of develop the chassis along the way.
As far as I understand, this is just the beginning of the cutting, because not only do we have to cut this apart, but in order to make everything fit now, we're gonna have to cut a large portion of the body and these flares. Do you know about how much we're gonna have to be cutting out of the back?
Not sure. We'll probably be going 2 or 3 inches into the fenders for sure, and all of this will get cut as much as this gets dropped. I mean, this body mounted directly to this beam before, so we'll be cutting all of this out. Most likely we'll just take the whole rear section of floor panel out of this thing, and similarly in the front arches, we'll take the, just cut it all out.
What's really cool with this build is we've done a ton to it already, but we're just scratching the surface. So I think I'm gonna wrap this episode up, and we're gonna start the next one with a lot of action. That means getting the gantry out, we're gonna be lowering the body onto the frame, figuring out where these new points contact, and starting to cut into this. So there's gonna be large sections of both the front and the rear cut out, the wheel arches and the tires are gonna be mounted up in there just to see how we can get that perfect fitment that we need while keeping the suspension dynamics competitive. He can actually take this car out to the racetrack after all this is done, because after all, that is his dream. He wants to look like it's a render that he saw and also perform like it's a race car, and getting those things to happen simultaneously is tough, but it is doable. Now, the really cool thing about that is most people don't go this in depth on a Volkswagen Beetle build. So we've got something really unique here that we can get creative with, and then the end result is going to be something that you don't see every day. So I'm getting really excited for this one. Hopefully you guys are too. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe to the page, like this video, share it around with your VW friends, and we'll see you in the next episode.